Weddings are a big deal. There's a lot of preparation that goes into them, and we anticipate them and we serve others, and it's a great, happy time. Jesus went to a wedding. He did his first miracle, his first sign in Cana of Galilee. John's gospel gives us 7 signs, and this first one is a powerful story. Chapter 2 of the Gospel of John starts like this. On the 3rd day, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. What does it mean by the 3rd day? Well, just before this, in the last 2 days, Jesus has been gathering his disciples. John the Baptist has declared him the Lamb of God, and John, the apostle, and Andrew begin to follow Jesus, and soon they bring in Peter and Nathaniel and Philip, and it becomes a group. They're all invited to this wedding. Weddings in those days could last several days, but there's a problem at this wedding. The wine has run out. That would be very humiliating, embarrassing for the bridegroom. For the bridegroom was the one in charge of providing for this great feast. Mary, the mother of Jesus, gets involved. I can understand that. She seems to have some connection here, maybe as a relative. I've been an aunt at a wedding. I've been asked to do the flowers or to help with the reception or to do the guest book. When you're a relative, you get involved, and Mary does get involved. She sees the problem and is concerned. She simply comes to Jesus. She knows he's the answer. She says, they have no wine. She doesn't beg. She doesn't demand. She just states the problem. And listen to Jesus as he responds. He says, "Woman, what does that have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." Look at that word woman. He doesn't say mom or mummy, but it's not disrespectful. It'd be like you and me saying madam or ma'am or Mrs. And yet there is a distancing here, a formality, a reminder. He has left the home. He's independent now, and he's on a mission. He says, my hour has not yet come. Well, I think he means he's gathering his disciples, he's getting ready, but he hasn't started publicly preaching or publicly healing or doing things. Mary responds in faith and trust. She says to the servants, do whatever he tells you. This is my idea. I think Mary understands Jesus and his compassion and his heart. He's probably helped her many times. She knows she can trust him to do something. She doesn't know what that something will be. I do know this is not Jesus obeying his mother. How do I know that? Because in the next verses in John 5, this is what we read. The Son can do nothing of his own accord, but only what he sees the Father doing. Jesus is submissive to the Father. He will do what the Father tells him to do. Now, we don't see any signs that he stopped and prayed, but we know he must have submitted himself to the Father, and that tells us something about the Father. The Father also cares about this problem. He has sent his Son to walk among common, everyday people like you and me. And he knows our problems and is concerned. I find that so comforting and interesting to remind myself, God is concerned about my problems, my everyday needs, and he responds. So the very next thing that Jesus does is he turns to those servants. He points out that there are 6 stone jars sitting there. They are large jars used for the religious rites of purification in the Jewish law. They are 20 to 30 gallons large, each one of them. And he tells them, fill them with water. And they do it. In fact, they're so enthusiastic, they fill it right up to the brim. Maybe they're a little doubtful, like, what's he going to do? Add something to this? There's no waving of a wand or magic words or anything. He just simply says, do this. And the next words are, he says, now draw out some of that water and bring it to the master of the feast, the person who's really in charge here. And they do it. They bring it to the master of the feast. He tastes it, and it's now wine. And he says, this is amazing, good quality. In fact, he calls over the bridegroom and says, what is this? Most people serve the best wine at the beginning and save the poorer quality for the end, but you are now serving the best wine. He doesn't know where it's come from. He doesn't know how it's been transformed. But those everyday servants, they know. The Apostle John quietly says in verse 11, this, the first of his signs, Jesus did at Cana in Galilee and manifested his glory, and the disciples believed in him. These signs are to point us to the true Jesus, to be able to see him as he is, the Son of God, the Christ. And by believing, we will have life. And so Jesus has manifested or shown his glory by doing this amazing work, and his disciples believe in him all the more. What can we learn from this sign? Well, we can learn that Jesus has got the power to turn water into wine. We can see that he is powerful, the creator of all things. The definition of transformation is a thorough or dramatic change in form or appearance, or the spontaneous change of one element into another. Jesus can transform me into something new. And it's interesting that the very next chapter in this gospel is about being born again. Born again means we start all over with a changed heart, a changed life. Galatians 2:20 tells us, I have been crucified with Christ. In other words, I've died. It's the old Jackie no longer lives. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Do you see how powerful this first sign is? What hope it gives us? How it begins the whole main idea of this gospel? When we believe, we have a spontaneous change of our very nature. We are no longer lost sinners. I used to be able not to control my tongue. I couldn't even make good choices. I did a lot of things I'm ashamed of. But when I was born again, I was a new person. Oh, I still had a lot of processing. I still have a lot of processing to do. But I'm different, and I experience more power to change. It's interesting that those 6 jars of water were used in the Old Testament for purification. Water that could wash the outside, but could not touch the inside, the heart. It was a religious rite. It was according to the law, but it wasn't a solution to the sinful heart that we struggle with. We needed true purification from sin. Jesus washes away all the sin nailed to the cross, so that when he rose again, he rose with new life, and new life is what he gives us. Now we walk according to the Spirit, new creations. So who needs to hear this story? Who will you tell? Here's my RX for joy. Ask yourself, do I believe in Jesus as the Son of God, the Christ? And Mary tells the servants, whatever he says to you, do it. How can we apply that to our lives? Is Jesus asking you to do something? Whether it is believe in him or tell the story to someone else.